How's it going, everybody? Welcome back to Gatos on Ice. It's our second ever recording as we get to talk about the Florida Panthers win over the Chicago Blackhawks last night by a final score of 3-2. It's fun to talk about hockey again as we finally get to see our first look at this new look Florida Panthers team, make some decisions, make some presumptions about what we saw and what we can expect moving forward. So, before we get into some of the serious stuff, I do think it'll be fun, real quick, to talk about some of the things we saw off the ice, if you will, um, that happened over at the Amarant Bank Arena. Of course, being the banner raising, it's always fun to see a new banner being raised over there. And it was just great to see the turnout. And I really was wondering who was going to be the guy who would bring out the cup before the banner got raised. And it turned out to be Aaron Ekblad. And I got to say, that was a very nice call for them to go with the alternate captain who has been here for very many years, maybe one of the most underlooked veterans of this Florida Panthers roster. For Ekblad to be the guy that they went with to raise the cup, I think it was a great decision. And he just means a lot to this team. And he might be one of the most overlooked guys in the process, which makes it a little unfortunate. But yeah, it was great to see Aaron Ekblad. And also, I guess we can talk about the rings that the players and coaches got, because they officially unveiled them. And let me pull up this feed here real quick just to show you all. If you somehow haven't seen the rings already, my gosh, these are quite nice. Wow, look at those. So the first ring that the Florida Panthers debuted after winning the championship last season was pretty plain, right? It was pretty down to earth, which isn't a good thing. It's not a bad thing. It was just their logo, right? And you had designs all around. It was a good look. But this season they went with the dual Stanley Cups on the front. Of course, Stanley Cup champions to the side, Panthers up front, so you know who the hell just won. It's a lot. I think it's shinier than what we saw last year, and I think it's overall a much better design. And I got to say, a lot of people online were being like, "Oh, it's kind of weird that they would have two championships on one ring. What about the players who they just brought in who weren't part of the team last season?" Well, a lot of teams do that. The Miami Heat, when they won their second chip, had two Larry O'Brien trophies on the front. It even happens a lot in the sport of hockey as well. It's nice to see the fellas. And this is probably maybe the most controversial part of the ring, saying we apologize to no one on the inside. I know I've never seen this much hatred towards the Florida Panthers from opposing fan bases leading up to a season before. You had Boston fans, you had Toronto fans, and you had Tampa Bay fans somehow all teaming up in spite of the Florida Panthers' successes. And that is crazy. And I got to say, it's a good feeling. So the fact that they dropped this "we apologize to no one" tagline, not as a response, because obviously they had planned this out way ahead of time, but to see them actually do this was pretty funny, I got to say, all things considered. By the way, this is live. You want to bring up some comments, bring up some questions, go for it. This is a celebration, if you will, as like I said, 3-2 win over the Chicago Blackhawks to start the season. It was a great game all around, and we'll talk about that in just a sec. And then, of course, you have the banner. Oh, here's some more details here and there. Pretty basic stuff all around. It's kind of what you expect. It's not the old. I think there are two types of rings. The formal, you did it kind of rings like that one, and then you have the crazy rings, such as the ones that say the Eagles had, in which like it opens up and you see stuff inside. It's a little crazy, in my opinion. So that's a very nice formal ring. All right, let's talk about the actual game itself. The Panthers take down the Chicago Blackhawks by a final score of 3-2. It did not go into overtime. Thank goodness. I thought for a brief moment there, I thought it was actually going to do that, and I was getting worried. So let's take a look at some overall team stats here. Shots on goal, what do you expect? The Panthers were going to dominate. Even without playmakers like Matthew Tkachuk and Alexander Barkov, they still found their way into Chicago's zone of ice for a good chunk of that game, especially in the first period and definitely towards the third. not only when they got their the leading goal, but we're looking to add on an insurance goal, which they never did. But by gosh, they got pretty darn close to it. 37-19, all things considered. When it came to the physicality, it was surprisingly even, which I thought was interesting. I thought Florida would have had the advantage of that. Just walloped this very new, very young Chicago Blackhawks team all night around. That really wasn't the case. A lot of Panthers got hit. A lot of Panthers had to spend time off the ice to treat injuries that happened in the moment, which was kind of amazing. Reinhart went down. I believe Lundell went down. Rodriguez all went down, had to spend some minutes in the locker room. But, they're hockey players. They're tough. They came back, and they just played the rest of the way. So that's how amazing hockey players are, to the point where you can do this. But regardless, pretty even physically. And I'd say in some avenues, the Chicago Blackhawks actually came out the victor when it came to who was dominating with those hits, even if the stats say it was dead even. Alexander Guy was your man for faceoffs, but that didn't really stop the Florida Panthers for still doing the same thing, just sort of dominating in that department as well, whether it was some of the big name players that got that done as well. And when it came to penalties, I didn't love the amount of penalties Florida had in this game. Granted, it was 4 and it was the first game of the season, but it felt like there were some mistakes here and there, such as the penalties that Seth Jones committed, for example. But regardless, quiet night for Sergei Bobrovsky, and that's because the defense for this Florida Panthers team against Chicago was absolutely masterclass in that game, even with the 2 goals that they gave up. So with that said, one of the big things I wanted to talk about in this episode, if you even want to call it an episode, it's pretty much just a post-game, not even post-game because it's the day after. It is a reaction to the first win of the season, as well as a look at what's next for the Florida Panthers as they continue going. They'll be taking on an opponent tomorrow night. I'll need to double check. I think it's Philadelphia that they're getting ready to host. Yeah, Flyers, 7:00 tomorrow night, and that is an appropriate start time for the defending Cup champions at their own crib, not 5:00, which is how it was last night. I'm not going to say it's disrespect because you obviously had a tight schedule. There were 8:00 games, 10:00 games. I guess it makes sense to the point where you want to have the champions on first to be that first game, and I guess they ended up being the first team to win this season as well, which is kind of cool. But I don't know. A 5:00 time. I mean, a lot of people have jobs and need to work during those hours. And even then, they still sold out the place. So kudos to the Panthers for that. Still, I don't know if I really like 5:00 puck drops. 7:00 is definitely the better comfort zone when it comes to hockey games being played. So let's take a look at the lines that were introduced, because with so many guys out, being Nosek, Barkov, and Tkachuk, just to name a few, I was really interested to see which way Paul Maurice would go with how he was sort of getting players on the ice. And I think he landed on, of course, 4 good lines, all of which contributed in ways. But I think there were some that I had more questions about than others. Let's kind of take a look at some of the lines that were used. So let me share my screen again, and let's talk about it here. Starting off with the first line, which is definitely the holy hell kind of line. The pure hatred line, if you will, of Brad Marchand, Sam Bennett, and Carter Verhaeghe. Now, I think Marchand kind of had a somewhat quiet game, but as far as production from this line goes, it was all pretty much Carter Verhaeghe for most of that night, not just with that one goal, but he had many great opportunities for some others as well. Now, this is definitely not the most shocking line to see roll out. These guys have worked together for many, many games now. The only real difference is bringing up Marchand, which, I mean, he's a veteran who is used to these kind of positions, which is pretty much taking over Tkachuk's spot. He has the speed, he's physical, and very good IQs between Marchand and Tkachuk. That's why I think he fits that spot well, even if he didn't cash in on a goal last night. Though he had a couple of great opportunities, and all things considered, this was a good line. I think it could definitely be better. 14 minutes spent on the ice is pretty good, and it could have been a little bit better, this first line, but it was reliable for this first game, and that's pretty much all I'll leave it as. Now, when you move on over to the second line, that's definitely where things get a little bit more interesting. This was the bully line, if you will. This was the line that experienced a lot of hits to the face between Reinhart and Lundell. My gosh. And again, pretty good past work between all the guys working together. You look back a couple of years ago, 2023, this was one of those lines that put in some of the most work during that playoff run. And you really don't need to tell these guys too much. And when you have Sam Reinhart, who can sort of take over a game like he has done in the past, obviously we look a lot towards Game 6 of the Stanley Cup Final last season. How Reinhart, when he's in the ice, he's such a good two-way winger that he can just pretty much control a game by himself. So he's the main part of that. And then you have Lundell, who is another great addition defensively, and then Luostarinen, who is just the all-around guy that you can trust in this lineup. So we'll move on now to the third line. Evan Rodriguez, Jesper Bokvist, and of course, Mackie Samoskevich. This was the line that I think I had the most questions about how it would look, because the heartbeat of this line is going to be Mackie Samoskevich through trial and error. This is a guy that really excited a lot of people in his rookie season last year, although he did not really see that much playing time in the postseason, because it makes sense. Paul Maurice wanted to rely on some of the guys with experience in the playoffs, which I understand, but that means it's been a hot minute since we've got to see Samoskevich on the ice and how he can contribute to this offense. And I got to say, it's just a small sample size. It was one game last night, but holy hell, I think Mackie Samoskevich can prove to be a hero for this Panthers offense, especially with the guys like Barkov and Tkachuk out. Samoskevich, while he didn't score a goal, he was providing setups the entire game and ended up, I believe, with 2 assists on the night. Yeah, he didn't even have a shot in that game, but he didn't need to when he was setting up other players to get the job done for the Panthers on offense. And if that's what he's going to bring to the table, then my gosh, he could be the wingman of the year for this Panthers offense, which is going to be beautiful to see. And of course, you have Evan Rodriguez, who was hit with a penalty and was hit with something even worse that sent him off the ice for a little bit. This was definitely the biggest unknown as far as lines go for last night. I think, and all things considered, they ended up being a beautiful combination. It's a fast line too. Mackie Samoskevich can fly around the ice, which is awesome. They forced turnovers too. And I mean, they got the game-winning goal. Bokvist, with the pass from Samoskevich, gets by Spencer Knight, which, by the way, it was great to see him again. I love the fact that they had a welcome video for him on the brand new Jumbotron. And usually I don't like when the Panthers fans scream Knight and during the national anthem, but I guess when he's back home, you more than certainly can, and they did. So that was cool to see. So I was impressed by this line. I think line number 3 might be the one line that everyone watching this really needs to focus on as it continues, because Mackie Samoskevich could have a breakout year. And again, you need to take this with a grain of salt, right? It's one game. It was one game against a Chicago Blackhawks team that is new, that is inexperienced, that has a first-year head coach. So maybe in that sense, it was the perfect opponent for the Panthers to play in their first game of the season with all these guys out, just to kind of see what they're working with. That may have been the perfect team to play. They're not amazing, but they have talent and they have speed they need to watch out for, obviously, with Connor Bedard, but even some of the other playmakers that the Chicago Blackhawks had. I think it was a good starting opponent for Florida, as it would turn out. And then you had the fourth line, which consisted of Gadjevich, AJ Greer, and Luke Cunnin. Cunnin, of course, they brought in, signed, I think he spent his last season with, I want to say Columbus. Yeah. He spent some time with Columbus. They just picked him up, and they're pretty much expecting Cunnin to be a good replacement for Tomas Nosek for the time being. And he pretty much did that. And this fourth line, I like to call him the fourth line of doom and despair, because it's just such a great feeling to even have a fourth line that can produce this much talent when so many NHL teams don't even have a roster that deep to construct a fourth line worth a damn. But thankfully, Florida does not have that problem. It's pretty much a playoff tested, playoff certified fourth line. It was so good and so crucial to getting to the Stanley Cup final. That's why Paul Maurice wanted that group out there. end game 6 and take home the cup. They were basically the first to celebrate. Technically, I think Kachuk was the first. He got off the bench pretty early, but you know what I mean. It's a physical line that can hold opposing offenses at bay while the other lines get rest or just sort of figure out how they want to adjust as the game goes on. That's what this fourth line provides, and they did that again and got a goal in the process as well. That's how great having a fourth line is, period, and having a productive fourth line, what it does for a roster. Florida has enough depth that you could probably draft a fifth line if you were crazy enough to do so. So stop sharing the screen there. All things considered, those were some good lines. And of course, you have some of the defenders. And as far as the big guy on defense for Florida this year, I mean, how can you not look at what Gustav Forsling can produce for this offense? And for this, I'm looking to something I usually never look at, but it is game score compositions. And let me see if once again I can share my screen here to show you all what I mean. But there are some players in which that can make their offenses and defenses excel when they're on the ice. And Gustav Forsling, look at what this guy was able to do, regardless of offense or defense. He provided it all for the Panthers last night, as he usually does, but without some of these other star players, you really get to see it now more than ever. 3 shots and an assist, 3 hits as well. You love to see that too. Spent a bunch of time on the ice and pretty much guided this Florida team pretty much on whatever he wanted to do. The team was able to do as well. Sam Iskevich, like I said, offensively, he was a spark plug for this Florida squad, and I really just can't wait to see how he's utilized more and more and more. And of course, Ekblad, like I mentioned earlier, kind of an unsung hero for the Florida Panthers at times. But yes, this team goes above and beyond when he's on the ice as well. And those are just some of the positive guys. And then you have some fourth line players that, like I said, you don't expect too much from that group. But even then, they can surprise you with what they're able to do on offense. Even Cunnin came in and was pretty much positive for the most part. And then you look at some of the bottom players like Kulikov and Petrie. Obviously, they're sort of finding their way around this team with expanded roles. Of course, Jeff Petrie they just brought in as well. Marchand, not going to say he had a disappointing night. He had a couple cracks at a goal here and there, but definitely was not the massive playmaker that a lot of people are expecting. And funnily enough, I think Marchand, just to completely change topics here for a second, is now top 10 NHL jersey sales, which may or may not be the first time a Florida Panthers player has ever been on that. Maybe Kachuk was on that when he was signed, but yeah, it's cool to see the love for Kachuk. Seth Jones, did Seth Jones have the worst night out of any Panther, all things considered? Maybe. Definitely disappointing. Was hit with some penalties. Did not do a whole lot as far as my knowledge goes of what we saw last night, but even then, not bad, all things considered. I think there weren't really a whole lot of negatives that I saw from the Florida Panthers last night. I think maybe the biggest one was a couple of breakaways here and there. Obviously, the first breakaway was cashed in on for a goal, absolutely cooked Sergei Bobrovsky on that play. And there were a couple of others, I believe 2 or 3 more, as the game progressed that Bobrovsky was more able to stop. It felt like after that first goal, I was watching, I don't know, the games 4, 5, and 6 of the 2024 Stanley Cup Final, and how Edmonton was able to come back in that series through the art of the breakaway. And it was definitely kind of awful, if you will, honestly, seeing how the season began with a breakaway goal on Florida's defense. But I'll leave it there. Bobrovsky, aside from that, had a quiet night because, well, he really didn't see the puck that much. 17 saves, 2 on the power play. Both power play units did not look incredible, though granted, Florida did cash in on one of their power plays. But clean night still, I guess you have to admit. And that's pretty much it. A great start for the Florida Panthers with not too much drama. You even had a brawl in that game as well. So, I mean, what more can you really ask for? But I definitely feel confident about this Panther squad moving forward. There were so many questions about what a Panthers offense and defense would look like without guys like Kachuk and Barkov playing there. At least for this first game, it looked pretty good. And again, it was just one game against a Chicago Blackhawks team that I don't feel too strongly in. When they take on some of the other top teams in the NHL, which are coming up, then we'll see how this team goes from here. But again, to close off this recording, let's take a look at the schedule one more time. Pull it up on ESPN. They got Philadelphia, and now we can finally say hey to Steve Goldstein and Randy Mueller on these local broadcasts again. Feels good. Ottawa, and of course, usually is a great matchup for the Tkachuk versus Tkachuk battles, but of course, that's not going to be the case this time around. Now, is it? But when you cross the line here, again, a lot of these teams, New Jersey could be a sneaky good team. I won't deny them that. But you have guys like you have teams like Buffalo and Boston, which are definitely not liked. I don't really have either of them with high expectations. But I think the first major test for this Florida Panthers team is still going to be at home against Vegas on October the 25th. I say Florida has a lot of depth. Vegas has that too. So when you pit both those teams together, I really am interested to see who's going to come out on top for that game. And then you have Dallas down the road as well. I saw someone's power rankings that said that Dallas is the best team in the NHL. I don't think I necessarily agree with that, but I think Dallas is going to be one of the better teams in hockey. And then you have some other playoff teams such as Los Angeles, Vegas once again, Washington. Anyway, we're getting kind of ahead of ourselves. Up next, though, is Philadelphia. That's going to be tomorrow at 7 o'clock on ESPN+. I'm curious to see how they'll look against that squad as well. Now that the preseason jitters, rustiness is gone, or at least I would hope it would be gone after this game against Chicago, I think this Panthers team can look even more locked in now. So that's cool. So I'll leave it there. Thank you all so much for watching. We had a lot of viewers for a first episode. For episode number 1 of Gatos on Ice, we had a lot of people watching that episode, either live or the days after, just to sort of prepare for this Panthers season. It was awesome to see the reception there, and already looking at the view counts already. I think it's going to be even better this time around, which I'm super excited to see, like in 24 hours before we get ready to watch Florida versus Philadelphia tomorrow night. So last episode was super edited. You saw a lot of cuts here and there because that was recorded hours in advance. And I thought, may as well do some editing here and make it as good as it can. Obviously, this is live, so there's no editing to be done here. So hope you all check that out. And obviously, of course, don't just follow me, although please, it's at Jake the MC. Of course, follow 5 Reasons Sports. Follow Alex Baumgartner, who, of course, was in attendance as well. They had pub subs at the press box. Got to make it out to a game or two then, hopefully, if they're doing that. I know they have the Panthers sub that you can get at Publix, so it'll be interesting to see that. And all righty then. I think we'll wrap it up here. Again, final score, Florida 3, Chicago 2. Great game all around. Great start to the season. Florida is historically a really good team when it comes to home openers to start up the season, especially after winning another championship. So thank you all so much for watching. And until next time, have a great rest of the day.